Okay, I'd like to call to order the Village of Lake Bluff Sustainability and Community Enhancement Ad Hoc Committee meeting for Tuesday, March 18th. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes. Member Busio?
Present.
Member Cole?
Present.
Member Hantz?
Here.
Member Mangelcock?
Here.
Member Twishel?
Present.
And Chair Renner.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Okay, next up is consideration of the February 18th, 2025 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments, edits, revisions? Hearing none, might I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Okay. Roll call or call, all in favor?
Voice vote, yeah, all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next up on the agenda, we allow 15 minutes for anyone in the audience who wishes to, or online, who wishes to speak on something not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone who wants to speak on something not on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we move to general business.
Okay. So we will have a presentation by Eileen Kennedy of Baxter and Woodman on the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And let me just pull up that PowerPoint really quick. All right.
How do I change?
You can, I can just go through them if you want to
Great.
let me know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. As Clara said, I am Eileen Kennedy. I work for Baxter and Woodman, and I'm here on behalf of the village to discuss the stormwater quality program that the Village of Lake Bluff has in place. So you can head to the next slide.
Okay.
So when we think of stormwater quality, we think of different things that can impact the surface water. And so different stormwater runoff can contribute various different pollutants to the local surface waters. For here, we have Lake Michigan as a big one, Skokie River as another one. And all of these can contribute to different water quality impairments, whether that's sedimentation, nutrients, metals, detergents, oils and grease, bacteria, and trash and debris that might be on the streets that gets into the storm sewer system that can go through the system and carry away to surface waters. Next slide.
Yep.
So the village is required by Illinois IEPA to implement different best management practices under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, which is NPDES, and that permit requires the village to follow the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, or MS4 program. This program has different requirements for the separate storm sewer pollution preventive practices. That includes water quality monitoring and outfall inspections, as well as staff training and different program documentation and reporting. You can continue the next slide. Under the Illinois IEPA, they come up with this list and they review it every so often of impaired water bodies. This is also known as the 303D list. So Lake Michigan, Skokie River, and Pettibone Creek are all within the boundaries of the village and are on this list. The reason that they are on this list is different pollutants are measured by the IEPA and they can be above a certain level, and that puts them on this list. A lot of things can come to mind with that, whether it's phosphorus, which is a really hot topic right now, and chlorides from salt or any de-icing or snow removal activities, dissolved oxygen, sediments, and also fecal, which is an indicator of bacterium, and human pathogens from natural sources or from sanitary sewer overflow during large storm sewer events. Other common sources of the of these pollutants can be from general municipal activities. I mentioned snow removal and de-icing activities to safely maintain the roads during those events. Paint from roadway stripping can also be another factor or another pollutant. Cleaning solvents from any vehicle wash, landscape materials that get washed, that's a big contributor to sediments that are in these water bodies, and other lawn chemicals and pesticides or herbicides or nutrients that are in gardens can also contribute.
You know, before you go, what does the map indicate up there?
So that is one of the maps from the 303D list. It is just showing the general kind of area that Lake Bluff is. These are very broad maps. So it's kind of just each water body has a code name. Okay. So that's what those code names are.
Okay.
So we can move on to the next slide.
This is what I wanted to know about.
So I also mentioned required documentation. One of the big ones is the Stormwater Management Program Plan. This document describes the overall organization of the MS4 program within the village and the responsible departments and roles that they take in the program. There's a notice of intent that is submitted to IEPA for each permit update, which is typically every 5 years, and just identifies the program commitments. And then there is an annual report to IEPA that just outlines the status of the program implementations. And all of these are found on the Lake Bluff website under the Public Works Department. So I'm mentioning this MS4 program a lot, but what actually is it? So there are 6 BMPs or control measures that are under this program. One is public education and outreach, so this, and then public involvement and participation. This falls under both of those, this public presentation. Other activities include illicit discharge and elimination, detection and elimination, construction site stormwater control, post-construction stormwater management, and pollution prevention and good housekeeping in municipal operations. So we can move on to the next slide. One of the other activities that the village does follow is stormwater outfall inspections. These are performed during dry weathers, and it's an annual program where all outfalls are inspected during that time period. And we're looking for evidence of pollutant discharge. That's why it's done in dry weather versus wet weather, because the rain could flush out any pollutants. Legal or improper connections to the drain system, and then just a general check of any structural issues that might be found. Those get documented. The other aspect of that is water quality monitoring. There are 4 locations that are sampled on an annual basis, 2 at the Skokie River and 2 at Lake Michigan. And this is required by IEPA as a part of this permit, but Lake County Health Department also samples Lake Michigan beaches on a regular basis. The other aspect of the MS4 program is good housekeeping practices by municipal staff. So in order to implement that, staff gets annual training on the best management practices, and different topics that are covered include building maintenance, park maintenance, stormwater system maintenance, roadway and de-icing practices, recognizing what an illicit discharge may look like, and other material handling, waste management handling, and spill response. The village has really great programs that are all listed on their website about different things that residents can do that can impact the stormwater sewer system. So there are articles on waste collection and recycling, what to do with something, whether it can be paint or gasoline, where to distribute those, and where to dispose of those properly, rather than pouring it down the drain, which we don't want. So all of these are on the Lake Bluff website as well. The village also has quite a few different articles that are available on the website under stormwater solutions. And these cover things on local water quality, fertilization, lawn watering, what to do, what happens after a large storm event. So there's a lot of different good items on there for residents to also look at. For any general questions, the Public Works Department is there to answer or to report any water quality issue as well. So the MS4 permit is currently in renewal by IEPA. It is expected this year, but we're not promised it. They've been promising it for quite a few years, so no promises. But additional requirements from this permit are included in public education and survey, and also different pollution prevention and inspections at municipal facilities. That is all I have. Are there any questions?
Thanks so much for the presentation. So what trends are you seeing over time? What's changing? What's getting better? What's getting worse? What if we're testing every year, what should we know?
That is a great question. I personally actually have been doing the testing for the last couple of years. And the information that we're receiving is pretty stagnant, for lack of a better word. It's not in poor quality for when we're doing that sampling, or it's not reaching exorbitant amounts where it's a red flag.
So you're not seeing a lot of fluctuation.
No, and that is also a good thing as well. So when those water quality samples are collected is after a rain event. So that system is being flushed out. So we're making sure that everything that's being collected is kind of in the realm of what we're looking for.
So you're not, so I'm getting a cold. My voice is all over, but so you're not seeing, because of the increase in large storm events, you're not seeing that compromising results compared to previously. It's still being pretty consistent.
I believe so, yeah. I have to look into it a little bit further to get a full confirmation, but as far as I remember seeing, it's been a minute since I looked at it, apologies, that they're pretty consistent year after year.
Okay, thanks.
I believe with the studies that have been going on for the large pipe to get water out of town, there's a component of the discharge that includes filtering and separation of debris and fluids as part of that large pipe that they're eventually hoping to help with our flooding issues during those large rain events. So I know that, making sure that stuff is diverted and trapped before it gets out to the lake is important.
Yeah, that is very good.
What, if you could recall from your testing, what are the contaminants that you most see in the discharge water?
So we're testing for a variety of items. It's phosphorus, chlorides, sedimentation, basically everything that was listed
Right.
In one of the previous slides. We're looking for those nutrients. We take a dissolved oxygen reading. We're looking for sediments. There's a fecal chloroform that we get tested as well. So there's different parameters that we ask the lab to test on the water samples we collect.
Okay. I was just curious if you could recall, which ones of those lists stands out as the highest level?
I don't have an answer for you at this
Okay,
time, I'm
that's
sorry. We believe we collected samples in either October or November, so it's been that long since I've looked at the
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah, that's okay, that's okay.
You know, oh, sorry,
That's
Mike, go
okay,
ahead.
no.
Yeah.
What I'm just trying to get to is the ones that we have influence over.
Exactly.
And, you know, what strikes me as part of our committee and some of the other initiatives we're looking at is, you know, native habitats and less lawn care with fertilizers and nitrogens and chemicals.
Yes.
And so I was looking to see if we have any data that would maybe show where that pops up on the list. And if that's
Yeah.
one that we could have influence over, that would be interesting for us to try and put a little spike on that if we could.
Yeah, I can send the graph that we have accumulated over time of all the parameters to Clara
Okay,
and share it with
thank
That'd
you
be
guys.
great.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Do you monitor any other neighboring communities, your firm? If you do.
Not here, not
Oh,
here.
Okay.
Not, I don't think, not in Lake County.
Okay.
We don't personally do the sampling in other Lake County communities. But the Lake County does do its own testing, as I mentioned before, on these water bodies. And they do have some information on the Lake County Health Department website. So there should be some sort of water quality report that's on there as
It's
well.
always nice to benchmark.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience?
We have a question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm curious as to, you said you send it to a lab. How does the lab do the testing?
So the lab does standard protocol testing, standard operating protocols. There's a couple of different kits that they might be using, but everything, there's a giant book of standard operating protocols that have all of these tests included on how to do them, and they follow those. It's kind of a general academic, this is how you perform this test.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. Oh, if you have a question, please come up and give your name and address. So it's being recorded.
Hi. Ann Bernbeck, 335 Briar Lane. I'm just curious if you look at all in what goes into the pollutants, PFAS, the forever chemicals, or microplastics?
So
or
we
any
don't,
of those?
we don't test those. It's not generally part of what we test, and sometimes those are hard to quantify. I would be interested in seeing if they would include those parameters as part of testing requirements, but I don't think that would be in the, been trying to get this permit that's in renewal out for at least the last 5 years. So I don't think it's included in this permit at this time, but possibly could be a parameter that is being looked at later.
Insecticides, pesticides?
Well, pesticides are included under the nutrients.
Okay.
Yeah. Phosphorus and nitrogen,
Yeah, those are fertilizers.
they're also in pesticides.
Well, I'm talking about more, for other types of pesticides and herbicides like Roundup. And, you know, they don't use.
They're still
phosphates, but
they're still phosphorus.
phosphorus-based, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So let me stop sharing that one and pull up the other.
Thank you for your patience, John.
Okay, John, can you see the screen there?
Yes, I can. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
All right. Okay, are we ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, well, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for having me here today to talk to you a little bit about where we're at with the outdoor lighting ordinance. This is, of course, a second round on this. We've already gone through one iteration, and Claire got a hold of me a while back and said, can you take a look at our version 2, which I was glad to do. And I've got about, not long, about 12 or 13 minutes worth of presentation here. So if you go to the next slide, please, for me, Clara. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about for my part, and then we'll open it up to questions. I want to just remind you what the basis for my analysis was, how I looked at your ordinance with respect to this emerging canon of best practice around dark skies. Then I'll tell you about the main policy elements that I was looking at in the analysis. And that will informs then, of course, when we had the look at the revised version. And then lastly, I'll step through each of the major recommendations in my memo and then let you ask questions. So
John?
next slide, please.
John,
Yes, sir.
quick question. In your presentation, do you, because some of the people in the audience may not know who you are. The committee is very familiar with the qualifications. If you do not have it, would you summarize who you are and what you do?
Yes, for the benefit of the folks in the audience, my name is John Barentine, and I'm principal at Dark Sky Consulting, LLC, which is based in Arizona, but I work all over the country. My background and training is I'm a physical scientist, and in particular, my training is in astronomy, so a lot having to do with the measurement of light. And prior to my consulting work for the better part of a decade, I was on the staff at an organization called Dark Sky International, which you'll hear me talk about in a minute, which is the premier non-governmental organization in the world that advocates for dark skies and reduction of light pollution.
Thank you.
Okay, can I have the next slide, please?
Yep.
Thanks. So the main source for the analysis of your code that I did in both versions is a set of principles that Dark Sky International publishes called the 5 Principles for Responsible Outdoor Lighting. And this little infographic summarizes what those are. So this is very high level. It doesn't get into the details of policy yet, but it informs the ideas that go into the kinds of policies that we think are most effective in reducing light pollution. And it comes down to these 5 concepts. I won't go into a lot of detail about this, but what to know about this is the principles are built around the notion that the light that we use at night in outdoor spaces is for the benefit of humans, and we should use it to our greatest advantage, which involves reducing the amount of waste. There's considerable wasted artificial light at night in our environment. And we reduce that waste by making sure that the light is there in the places and the times that it's needed. When there isn't anybody around, it's dimmed or extinguished where possible. We've tuned the intensity and the color of light to the need. So we're providing first and foremost for the human users of outdoor spaces. And to the extent that we can reduce the light that we're providing that's not useful for people, we think over time that's the key to reducing light pollution and protecting dark conditions at night. Next slide, please. So adjunct to the 5 principles, these are some of the additional sources that I looked at. Some of these are published by Dark Sky International. One of those in its former incarnation as the International Dark Sky Association was published alongside the Illuminating Engineering Society, which is the professional society of lighting engineers in North America. That's the Model Lighting Ordinance that had, at the time, it's a little out of date now, and they're working on updating it, but it is still considered to be sort of the go-to for all of the best practices that we would put into a municipal lighting ordinance in the US. I also looked at their International Dark Sky Community Program guidelines, which is what they hold up as sort of the standard for the best of the best. I looked at their values-centered outdoor lighting policy, which is sort of an operationalization of the lighting principles. So adding a little more context to it. And then I also looked at something called the Responsible Outdoor Lighting at Night, or Roland Manifesto, that is a set of ideas that was published by the lighting engineering community in the US and extended to now to the world, that sets a standard for ethical lighting design as regards dark skies and light pollution. So if you're looking for all of the best practices in outdoor lighting that affect dark skies and the nighttime environment, this is what you would look toward. Next slide, please. So what I'll do now is I'll step through several of the specific concepts that I was looking for in the analysis that are part of that canon of best practice. The first of those is shielding of outdoor lighting. This is what gives us the best lever on the problem of light pollution, is ensuring that the light that we emit from our sources is aimed down at the ground where people need it and not up into the night sky where they don't. And the standard here is something called a fully shielded fixture that you can see towards the center, the one that's labeled best. That's where you have a cover or a shield that surrounds the light source and ensures that all of its light is emitted downward and not out to the side or in the upward direction, because that kind of light, that upward directed light, we know is the biggest source of the problem of light pollution. So we encourage municipalities to make sure that lighting that's permitted in their jurisdictions is fully shielded, with, of course, as with all of these things, with a reasonable set of exceptions for things like very low-level sources that it's not practical to shield. So certain things like holiday lighting, for example, or things like string lights. So this is at the core of what we're recommending. Next slide, please. We also want you to consider the color of the light through something we refer to as spectrum control. And by that, we mean ensuring that the color of lighting is appropriate for the nighttime environment, that preserves public safety while limiting its impact on wildlife in particular. We do this through recommending a number that's quoted in kelvins, which is kind of a funny unit, but it refers to something that is known as correlated color temperature. So in the picture on the right, that's a series of light sources that are all considered to be white light, believe it or not, even though on the left it looks a little more orange and on the right it looks a little more blue. And where we want people to be is on the left side of that picture at these lower Kelvin ratings, because those sources have the least amount of blue light. And we know through a lot of scientific research that blue light has the greatest impact on both the night sky as well as on wildlife and ecology. Dark Sky International recommends a color temperature that shouldn't exceed 3,000 Kelvin for general purposes. So that's the standard that we looked at. Next slide, please. We encourage municipalities to prevent what we refer to as overlighting, which is the tendency to use vastly more light than is called for in international standards like those published by the Illuminating Engineering Society. They issue recommended practices on all manner of lighting applications where they will tell you what they consider through their years of practice and research to be safe lighting levels for any sort of outdoor application. But the tendency of both lighting designers, municipalities, and also the public is to consume a lot more light than this. So we recommend putting reasonable and sensible limits in place that tie to those standards in one way or another to ensure that the lighting for the task is adequate and fit for purpose, but doesn't go overboard in the other direction in a way that tends to increase light pollution. Next slide, please. We also encourage municipalities to enact lighting curfews, again, where reasonable and sensible. These are policies that set a time of day after which lighting should be either reduced or extinguished. It may depend upon the application as to whether there's a good reason to leave the lights on. If there's not going to be anybody around, if it's a large parking lot or something and it's in the middle of the night, there's not a human use for that light, we encourage the light to be extinguished if possible. And this is done through the use of adaptive controls like the timer in the picture in the center, which is, of course, is an idealized view of what you would put on a lighting system, but it's the one that I think we're most familiar with. And it simply adaptively changes the characteristics of the light according to the time. so that we ensure that we're following the 5 lighting principles by making sure that the light's available when it's needed and trying to reduce its impact during times when it's not. And so this is something that, in addition to reducing the effect of the lighting on the environment, will also ultimately save money and electricity by reducing the dependence on lighting at times when there's no one around to use it. Next slide, please. We encourage municipalities to prohibit to the greatest practical extent something we call light trespass. That's suggested by the cartoon drawings on the left. The basic idea is to keep your light on your own property. There are different ways of writing this into codes that communities use. Most commonly, they will set a threshold at the property line, a threshold of light intensity, and you're either over or under that intensity. We think that when communities do this, that one benefit to this is it tends to reduce nuisance complaints to code enforcement. So that's one thing to take some of the burden off of the municipality. But it also, I think, promotes good relations between neighbors. We've all had that experience where, you know, we have a neighbor across the street who has a really bright porch light that shines in our windows at night. And a prohibition on light trespass, which can be practically implemented with the selections of things like the light fixtures and how and where they're mounted. And you sometimes you can adjust a light fixture in ways that will prevent this trespass. It's just a basic consideration for one's neighbors, and it's pretty easy to write into codes. Next slide, please. We think that public lighting should be regulated at a particular level, and that municipalities generally should not exempt themselves from following their own laws. It does not mean that all of the same sorts of regulations that we would suggest for different kinds of land uses, such as commercial or residential uses, would apply to public lighting. Obviously, we're not suggesting that you turn your street lights off during the overnight hours or anything of that nature, but that generally speaking, the same types of broad regulations that would apply to private lighting should also apply to lighting that's on public property or in the public right of way. Next slide, please. And lastly, of these several ideas that are the top level for lighting ordinances, we encourage municipalities to amortize their existing non-conforming lighting, whether it's public or private in nature. And sometimes that involves perhaps a retrofit if there is an element like shielding that's missing, or it could be something like replacement if the lighting cannot be brought into compliance by a retrofit. Normally, in their zoning codes or their land use codes, communities do this through a sort of a process of attrition. So if you have a major update, for example, a renovation to a property, resumption of use after abandonment, that sort of thing, that all of what replaces the lighting on the site has to comply with the code. And it's fine to let your existing lighting be exempt at the beginning, provided that it's other than things like replacements of consumable parts like lamps. Of course, we don't want to suggest that that's not reasonable, but that on a time scale that's no longer than about 10 years from enactment, that you should ensure that all of that non-conforming lighting is eventually brought into compliance. It does not have to be done in a way that is very active on the part of the community or creates a problem for code enforcement. Just think of this as an additional tool in the code enforcement toolbox, as it were. Next slide, please. So in the last couple of minutes, what I will do is just run through quickly what my recommendations are on the current version of your lighting update or ordinance update. I have a few general remarks that are mainly minor in nature, more sort of housekeeping, that are at the beginning of the memo. I suggest adding a few definitions, mainly for technical terms, so that when those terms appear in the language of the code, the user can understand what they mean. Again, as with respect to the amortization that I was suggesting, I do think it would be a good idea for the village to amortize existing non-conforming lighting within 10 years. There was some language in the current version about that refers to the major project threshold and tying amortization only to those conditions. But again, the best practice here is to set a future date that you sunset the exemption that's given to the non-conforming lighting. I would lower the shielding threshold in a particular kind of zoning situation that's referred to non-residential and non-park in the ordinance, and set that to be no more than 1,000 lumens per luminaire. Luminaire is just another kind of a term for lighting fixture, and that's to bring it into alignment with the Dark Sky International recommendations. Next slide, please. For your security lighting, right now the language in the proposal generally exempts security lighting from the other restrictions of the ordinance. It would allow it with a motion sensor requirement, which I think is a great idea. I would add a little more context to that, particularly with respect to the expectation on the property owner to ensure that motion sensor switching is not triggering inappropriately. That's usually an adjustable setting on the equipment. So make sure that it's only, people and large animals essentially, and not every time a leaf that's blowing in the wind passes the sensor that it's triggering the light. And the duration of the trigger is generally something that can be set. And I recommend that shouldn't exceed 5 minutes per trigger event, so that light is fairly quickly off if whatever's causing the motion has left the scene. But of course, then again, if there is a legitimate security issue and it persists, the light can remain on so as to indicate the presence of a potential threat. There is a proposed exemption to the color temperature limit in the luminaire standards subsection. I recommend eliminating that. I don't think there's a good cause at this juncture in history to enable people to use high color temperature lighting. There's plenty of product on the market at appropriate color temperatures, and there's no penalty in terms of energy efficiency or deficit in terms of color rendition from lighting at lower color temperatures, and it will do a lot to reduce the emission of blue light in the environment. And to also, I recommend striking the proposal to eliminate compliance checks for limits in the residential uses in your site standard subsection. This mainly affects either major renovations or new construction. So I'm not suggesting that in cases where permits are not required for lighting that there should be some means of checking up on people. This is mainly that in the same sense that for a new construction permit, for example, that you would have to show compliance with the electrical code, that there be a means of making sure that whatever lighting is installed at the site matches whatever the permit was. So again, I would recommend that you consider eliminating that or the proposal to get rid of the compliance checks. Next slide, please. In that luminaire standards subsection, there's an exemption right now essentially for public lighting. Again, that's not considered to be a best practice. I made some suggestions for what appropriate regulation could look like. It also doesn't have to necessarily be done in your code. There are some communities that they don't have an exemption for their public lighting, but they also don't prescribe what the regulation is. That could be left up to something like a city manager memo, for example, after the fact. But again, the consensus in this is that the municipality should generally follow the same kinds of rules that it expects its residents to follow. For the sports lighting section that's in luminaire standards, there's right now just a brief mention of that in a couple of provisions. I recommend that the village consider adopting all of the provisions in the guidance for sports lighting that is issued by Dark Sky International. There are about half a dozen items there that I mentioned in the memo that I recommend that you adopt. And then lastly, I recommend that you look at your sign code as needed to modernize it. Again, consistent with the Dark Sky International guidance for illuminated signs, and especially with respect to electronic displays, to the extent that that's allowed in the village. These are becoming increasingly common, and in many jurisdictions, they have very few regulations on them. So they go in, they're very often, they're intense, lights very directional. I'm noticing that there's a lot of complaints about these displays. So making sure that your sign code deals with that adequately is a recommendation. Next slide, please. Oh, did it not get it may not have gotten my last slide. In any case, there was just a little picture at the end that was kind of a cartoon drawing of a community that goes from, on one end, shows houses and buildings with the typical kind of lighting that we find in a lot of communities, versus what happens as you gradually, oh, I guess it didn't get my last slide.
Sorry about that.
As you gradually get to, you go through all the 5 lighting principles and how, the neighborhood starts to look, it looks nicer at night. The visibility on the street is better. The sidewalk is more evident. The lighting is downcast on the homes, et cetera. So that's the idea where we're trying to get to here, is something that we think is effective. It's fair to the community. It includes all of these best practices. And I hope that's where you'll eventually land. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions about my memo or where the ordinance stands in its current draft form.
I have one question. It's been a few years since I designed lighting, but I used to do that for a while. The International Energy Code, which is adopted by the state of Illinois, does have, I believe, a substantial section on controls and from an energy standpoint to minimize energy. And I know that we adopt those within the village. Is there anything we need to be aware of on those codes or a reference in the standard?
No, that's a good question. I don't think you need to separately call it out again here, and it very much helps that you have adopted the energy code, and it will help beyond controls as well, because there's some energy efficiency things that affect lighting that's in the energy code that are useful here. I'm not aware of there being any sort of conflict or any problem that comes up in, for example, the part about security lighting in the draft ordinance, where I suggested making the regulation a little bit tighter around the user adjustable aspect of the motion sensors, for example. I don't think that will bring you into any conflict with the energy code.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I think, yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm just curious to know whether you see more smaller towns adopt this method versus larger cities, and how that kind of varies throughout the country.
That's also a very good question. And I see it's easier to get this kind of code done in a smaller community. Once we get to the bigger cities in the United States, where you've got, often very complex land use situations and zoning situations, it's harder to do this without your code getting very long, because you have to anticipate sort of what all of those situations are. It's not impossible. As an example, I'm speaking to you tonight from Tucson, Arizona, where our population in city limits is about 550,000 people. And our metro is closer to 1 million, but our city outdoor lighting code is pretty close to what you have here in your draft form. There's a lot of overlap. So it can be done in bigger cities. I would say the reason that it was easier to get done here in Tucson than in other cities, for example, Phoenix, which is up the road from us, is that astronomy is actually a pretty big contributor to our local economy. And a lot of people are aware of that influence. And so if you ask them, why are our neighborhoods a little bit darker than they would be in a city like Phoenix, they identify that with protecting the observatories that are around Tucson. But by and large, in my experience, both when I was with the Dark Sky International as well as in my consulting, this seems to be easier done in a smaller jurisdiction than in a big city.
What would you recommend as a periodic review, let's say this is implemented this year, as a periodic review, 2 years, 3 years? What do you see as a good code revision cycle?
Generally, what I see for lighting codes is a timescale of maybe 5 to 7 years. It used to be they were on generally as long as a 20-year revision cycle, but we've seen so much change in the lighting industry and in lighting technology in the past about 15 years that I think in less than 10 years, you probably ought to take another look. And at least, if nothing else, make sure that your code has kept up with changes in lighting technology.
Yeah, I was thinking 4 or 5 would be the longest I would like to see, but yeah.
You can do it more frequently. Yeah, there's some municipalities that tie it to other section of their zoning code, for example, and they might only do it on a 10-year cadence.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think there's a good reason to say no to that.
Okay.
John, the slide when you had the color Kelvin spectrum going from, the real bright blue, almost white, bluish to all the way to orangish. Is there anything in best practices that you would recommend as far as residential lighting that could be, I know we're talking about grandfathering in fixtures, but some of it could be simply changing a light bulb. Is there anything in that you would say in terms of enforcement that could be put in an ordinance that would just simply, suggest lowering the intensity of the Kelvin scale on outdoor lighting on a residential's garage or something?
Yeah, so there are some municipal codes I've seen where the color temperature standard is lower in residential areas, in part because, to be honest, people like it, I think, more than they like that harsh blue color. They think of that as something that may be more appropriate for an industrial commercial type zoning, whereas they want a little bit more, a nicer ambience in residential areas. So you can easily obtain lighting on the commercial market for residential applications that goes down to as low as about 2200 Kelvin, at which point that light really takes on a very warm hue. It's not quite orange, but it's kind of heading in that direction. And you make a very good point, which for compliance purposes, in many cases, you can do wonders for residential lighting to bring it into compliance with these codes by swapping out a light bulb at a vastly lower cost than having to completely replace the luminaire. As an aside, sometimes I get asked about things like porch lights, and they say, well, what if I have a porch light with a clear cover, for example, and I can't get a shield from the manufacturer? People sometimes try to do some creative things, but we really recommend that they don't take any steps to retrofit a luminaire in a way that's not approved by a manufacturer, like adding their own shielding on. But generally, replacing a lamp is no problem. You might want to watch to make sure that you get a lamp that's rated correctly according to the wattage, that you don't put something in there that's a much higher draw than what the manufacturer recommends. But at least that can take care of the intensity issue. It can take care of the color temperature issue. And you can even get little inline timers or motion sensors that fit into light sockets. So you could also add the controllability. And if there's any concern about writing things like lumens or Kelvin into your code, the Federal Trade Commission about 10 years ago published a set of rules that says that essentially all new lighting products, including single light bulbs that are sold in the United States, have to have certain information on their product packaging. And that includes the lumen rating for that product and also the color temperature. So it makes it very easy for the end user or the consumer to go into a store, pick up a package off of the shelf, and get that information immediately. So they'll know right away, if they're aware of what the code requires, they'll know whether that product is going to comply with the code or not.
Okay, good. Thank you.
If the committee doesn't have any more, I'd like to see if anyone in the audience has any questions for John. If not, I think we really appreciate you doing this second review, John. It sounds like we've with your recommendations, we should be able to come up with a really good initial ordinance for the village. And I think, I think the next steps for our committee is to go ahead and we'll sit down and look at all his recommendations, get the next draft together, and then we can spend a whole meeting going over what we put in from his recommendations into the current draft and make sure there's consensus of all of you of putting those into his recommendations. I think they all seem, to me, on first pass, very sensible requirements. I think the most controversial, of course, always is the phase-in, right, or the limits. I think 10 years is more than fine, but I think there were a number of triggers to make people have to do that beforehand, such as renovations, replacements, upgrades, which would require these to be done before. But for people that aren't doing anything to their home or their business for 10 years, that's a fairly long time horizon for them to get in compliance. And really, honestly, within 10 years, most fixtures have to be replaced anyway, or light bulbs earlier than that, so, okay. All right, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Let me just pull up their item for the next one.
Yeah, next topic, which is the wildlife.
Yes. So Sue Raymore reached out. She's part of Growing Native Habitat Lake Bluff, and she is going to give a quick explanation of or not necessarily quick, sorry, of the Community Wildlife Habitat Designation program. So Sue, if you want to take a step up. I know you provided some materials. Is there anything that you want on the screen that would be helpful?
No, I think I wanted to talk shortly and kind of have a conversation. We're pretty passionate about this, but we believe that this is something we want collaboration with. So what does that look like in the community? You probably know that better than I do, so some information. And I know I wanted to keep everything electronic, but I thought I'd pass out since they sent them to me. These are some certification forms that we would provide for residents.
Thank you.
And we'll talk about it. Did you get a chance to see what we're looking at? So, I have Ann Berdebeck with me. She's going to help in this presentation. And as I said, I'm Sue Raymore. I live at 352 Briar Lane, Lake Bluff. And Ann Berdebeck lives across the street. So
335 Briar Lane.
So we're going to give just a little background of what this is, who we are. We've been here before. I think it was 5 years ago when I first came. So I'll let Ann start, and then I'll finish up short, and then hopefully we'll have a conversation.
So 5 years ago, during COVID, okay, I talk loud. During COVID, my neighbors and other friends got together to grow native plants. And we decided to do more than just share as a neighborhood. We kind of started a little growing native community. And that's when we came to you to ask about having a demonstration native garden. You guys were wonderful. We currently have it, especially thanks to Lisa over there. It's behind the public safety building. And we also have educational signs that we got a grant and people wrote. And we have one of those little lending libraries that our dear volunteer
Lee Sacknock
made before he passed away. And the purpose of it is nature-focused books, and the kids' books especially go very fast. But we've also done other things. We've done book discussions. We've had guest speakers come in talking about different topics with native gardening. We've had native gardening walks, and we've also met with people at the village market, outside the farmer's market, talking about plants, trees, education. We've worked with the village to plant more native trees. We had an awesome program that's continuing where we took acorns locally and we found a grower, and he grew them for 2 years and brought them back, and we sold them or found homes for all of them. How many did we do? 100 and something, yeah. So it was awesome. Sorry, I put you guys on the spot. And we're continuing to do that each year. So we've also collaborated with other groups like Bluff Open Lands, the Garden Club, getting with strong native plant interest. So I was looking in the paper and saw, I think you have a copy of it in your packet, about Highland Park going ahead and getting certified in this National Wildlife Federation Community Wildlife Habitat. And with all the things we're already doing, it seemed like a perfect opportunity. So I brought it to Sue, and she's like, yeah, because you have a list of the checklist. We've already done much of it. We're still in the organizing phase, but we met with the woman who is the lead in Highland Park, and it's very doable, especially because we already have the community garden and so many plans. So I thought I'd read you what the National Wildlife Federation's Community Wildlife Habitat goals are. It's a program that partners with towns, cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of all kinds to become healthier, sustainable, and more wildlife friendly. Community wildlife habitats, garden, and landscape with wildlife in mind. Promote the use of native trees and plants, work to reduce or eliminate the use of pesticides and chemicals, and integrate wildlife-friendly practices into sustainability plans and park master plans. And it just seems like a perfect fit. One of the keys with it, I know Sue's going to go through the future, is getting a lot of homes in this community to get certified and get their little plaque. And we need a total of 150 points, which could be 150 homes in this town. And that's why they do it, right? They're trying to get as many people involved in this. So that is one of our goals, and Sue's going to talk about some other plans.
Okay. She mentioned the points, so I'll continue too, because you get points, additional points, if it's a public location. So for example, the Carolyn Getz wetlands, we have to have water source. That's 3 points. And I believe the native planting that they did out in front of the Innovasi, this block, gets us 10 points. If we get into the school, it's 5 points. So we really think we can get to those 150 points. We've already had about 10 people in our group sign up, so pretty easy to do. But I wanted to talk a little bit. Lake Bluff already has a sustainability plan, and they also have the thematic corridor plan, and both of those encourage use of native plants. So we're speaking the same language. You guys are doing it, we're doing it. We'd like to have some sort of collaboration where we recognize the village for what they've done, they recognize us for what we're trying to do, and help encourage. One of the hardest things we know is education. Well, we sit out there at the farmer's market, we educate a lot. Every time people come by, we get a few more people on our list. We are just an email list, we're not a formal group. We didn't want bylaws. But we started at 35 people and we're up to 160. So we have an ear to a lot of people in the community. Not everyone is in Lake Bluff, but I'd say about 95% of them are. So, and I will say, number one is that we believe our community is people we know, and so much of that is related to the school district. So it is Lake Bluff, but it's going to include anything within the boundaries of District 65, because we think that's important, and those are the people that know Lake Bluff and come to Lake Bluff and use Lake Bluff. So that adds population to us, which gives us a little bit more work to do, but it's okay. We're ready, and I think we're going to change our name. We're to Growing Habitat Lake Bluff, make it a little bit shorter. So we were the Growing Native Community, and now this is sort of a subsection. We have 10 people dedicated to our leadership group, so we're moving. This program allows us to formalize our plan. National Wildlife Federation, as you can see from that worksheet that we gave you, there's a lot of organizational activities that we have to do, which helps us get organized, and we can be very clear about where we're going and set the expectation. So as we said, it's all about getting native, increasing our habitat. I gave you some background information, and I talked about the points. National Wildlife Federation has vast resources. If you've ever been on their website, they have tons of information. So I have these, they've also just sent me about 10 different folders of how kids can build bird boxes and how you can do this and how you can do that, and it's wonderful. So with this a lot, we have registration, administration, and then education and outreach. And like I said, we've already been doing a lot of that, and we will continue to do that and collaborate with others in town who want it to happen. We're also looking at grants, so we're going next week to talk to Rotary in different places to talk about getting some funds to do some of the educational things that if we want to do placards or some kind of signs or maybe register. So for example, Lake Bluff Open Lands has probably 6 or 7 of their preserves that we can get certified, and we'd like to be able to cover costs for that sort of thing. What else? She mentioned Highland Park. Highland Park is the second city in Illinois to get certified. So when I registered this, I registered it kind of as growing native habitat, and I gave the district boundaries of the school district because I wanted to be inclusive. And they contacted me immediately and says, does this include all of Lake Bluff? And I know they want to be able to say it's another city. So we have the opportunity, if we move quick, to be the third community in the state. Our goal isn't to be fast, it's really to do the outreach. So we're coming to you to hopefully ask if you agree with that we're on the right track and how we can partner. So a couple things we've thought of is some of the requirements under the registration is we need to have, or we would like to obtain a letter of support from community government officials. So I assume that means the village board. We also would like to get a proclamation passed announcing our community registration. We also would like to do some sort of celebration. So I hope we could use the public safety building or the gazebo or some public area, the farmer's market, to do some sort of celebration to kick this off with information for everybody. We also want to go to the farmer's market. Our long-term goal would be able to be at the farmer's market, not just outside with the Jehovah Witnesses. And I think it would be good. The native gardener, the master gardeners are there. So I'm like, well, this kind of fits in. And if we're working collaboratively with the village, it would really help us to do outreach. We get a lot of people outside of Innovasi, but I know we would get a lot more if we were inside the farmer's market. And we wouldn't do that every week, but maybe a day a month, like a Friday once a month to go there. And like I said, we grow plants, we give plants away, we have these trees. When we grew these trees, we went to the Klutschka's house right down the street by the library, huge bur oaks in the backyard and the beautiful specimen trees. And those are the acorns that we grew the bur oaks. And we didn't give them away, but we did sell them at cost. So they were, $20 a tree, which is pretty cool. So now we hope to do like a legacy tree thing. Take a picture with your tree and your family and watch it grow. And we've already talked to the History Museum about keeping the records for that. So a lot of things churning. So if we could get help from you, support from you, if you think we're on the right track, however you can help us with the board, the village board, to get a proclamation or get a letter of support that would help us. But I think this is right up your alley. You do so much. I've loved coming to these meetings. I've learned so much. You're doing really good work. And I'd like to be a partner and keep moving forward. Anything else? So, questions?
Motion to recommend the board makes proclamation.
Can I add, before we get to that, can I add a few questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's.
So you said that in order to get this certification for the town, like to follow in Highland Park stuff, there's a certain amount of points and things that have to be achieved. You mentioned a few things that you thought already might qualify for points. We were just discussing on the side here, we were involved in Jawa's redevelopment in front with the native prairie development. I think from my standpoint, and maybe being a former trustee, if you guys had put together a preliminary assessment that hey, we believe, looking at what we know in town already, you could get 75 points, or you could get 100, or you could get 50. And then this is how you would get to 150 points. I don't know if that's the right numbers that you mentioned. I think that type of preliminary assessment would help the board go, oh, well, we don't have, like you said, we don't have that far to go
Yeah.
to make it to the next step in terms of what the path is to go forward, rather than just saying we want to do this, we want to do it, but here's the path.
I love that. In fact, we're meeting next week, our leadership group, and that's one of the things on our agenda is to, let's do a head count. I've never seen them, it's the honor system, but we're not going to, so the only problem we have with some of our areas, does it have water? And that's one of the requirements to get certified. So, but for example, the Union Church, they put in a big native garden a couple of years ago. One of our members, she's on our leadership team, they're across the street from the ravine. And I said, does that qualify for water? They said, absolutely. So it's kind of fun to do this. So we definitely will be doing that, and we can send that information to you, Claire. And
The amount of things we need to do, I think we can get there, except that it's gonna be getting all of the community members' yards, because that's what's gonna be a bigger piece, and that's why publicity is so important. For example, we get 10 points if we improve our community's weed ordinances or other public policies to make them more wildlife friendly. That is the gas-powered blower ordinance right there, and that's 10 points. So you guys are doing so many things that are gonna help us with our numbers, but we'll go through it and mark them so you can see how much we've almost done, or
Right.
with a little help we can. Like the next one is work with the municipal or other local park agencies to convert parkland to wildlife-friendly landscapes. Now, we've done that some places, but maybe there'll be more opportunity, because that's 10 points.
well, we know that the Park District is doing, I happen to know, a renovation of the Knollwood Park. And one of the features they're putting into that when they do it, I believe next year, is a rain garden. So there we go. We have a.
They have a
you know,
pollinator garden right next to the driving range, a big one, right? It's a beautiful pollinator garden.
Yep.
It's very impressive. One of the things I wanted to call out is I am quite intimately familiar with the farmers markets manager, and I know that who happens to be my wife, and she has a very particular view of how the committee thinks, and I know that the committee strives to make the farmers market a true marketplace. So I think if you go to them saying, we are going to sell plants, native plants and trees, and we are going to raise money here, then they will say yes. But if you say we want to be an educational, we just want to communicate and get things out, they're going to be much more resistant to something like that.
That's a good point. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we do. When we sell nominal, like we
Yes.
cover our cost, but.
As long as it's a
way to give it-
marketplace.
Yep.
A marketplace focus.
Exactly.
They're going to be much more likely to say, yes, please come join us if you are marketplace focused as opposed to education.
That's something we've looked at. Even we, as a village committee, cannot have a booth. The police department cannot have a booth on fire safety.
Well, I've had 3 different board members from the Farmers Board, my daughter's on the Farmers Market Board, tell me that, well, maybe don't ask for every week, but just like occasionally. And again, is there something to sell?
If it's a market, that's a good
approach.
approach.
Yeah, if you, especially if you have native plants for gardens, people will come and buy you out if you're selling them at cost. I wouldn't recommend that you do that. I mean, I'm sure you need to raise funds for your own organization.
Well, again, we're looking at grants, but when I sell them, I have a little car. I just bought 26 flats of plants, and I'm going out to pick them up in the beginning of May. So we can do more. It's fun. We've been very cautious to not do more than we can manage.
Sure.
When we first started this, we had the garden, and I will tell you that garden, you want to talk about wildlife, you've never seen so many bugs on a garden, and they're just wonderful. Lisa has amazing pictures. And Luciana's on our board too. So it's one big happy family. So those are asks and so.
Question. So I don't know if you're familiar, it was quite a while ago, but when Conserve Lake County existed, they had a similar program. You could certify your yard and you'd get a sign. And I don't know what's happened to that program.
I do.
You do? Okay, because I was going to say my yard was certified. I have that. So I don't know how easy it is to just, switch it over.
Well, funny, but it's been in the village newsletter 2 or 3 times. It's, Conserve Lake County was consumed, I don't know what the proper legal term of how they absorbed, consumed, purchased, by openlands.org. And the Conserve Lake County, it's called a little bit different, but Mary Fartman is the woman who does the conserving, and she's probably been to 50% of our yards. We're on, yes, including Marietta's and.
Are they still certifying?
And they still do. Where this one, the reason this one is different is this one's saying, okay, you're doing it in individual yards. Let's collaborate with the community.
Yes.
And so we're really excited about the school. I've already spoken with Dr. Leali. Kids are important to teach this stuff to, so we've had a conversation with them. I'm meeting with Lake Forest Open Lands. I'm on the Lake Forest Open Lands board, and or Lake Bluff Open Lands, sorry. And we want to reach the kids, and that's one really good way to do it. But Mary Fortman is probably here. In fact, she had me speak this summer at an Open Lands luncheon, because she said Lake Bluff has a higher concentration of native gardens than any other community she works with in Lake County. And
Well, because my point was, if she allowed you to reach out to them, to ask them to do whatever it is to be certified here, you'd have an instant, pool of.
There's a different certification, though. That's really focusing more on native. This, the National Wildlife Federation requires a water source, which is simply, you can have a bird bath, but it does require that. So there's slightly different requirements. And National Wildlife Federation, again, their goal is to really get as many people, so they're going to want everyone to do their certification for $25.
I get that. I get that. I'm just saying, if people already want.
Yeah.
I
Certainly-
already
certainly
did
a
it.
good
I'm
place to
familiar-
start,
It's
right?
like low-hanging fruit. I think
gotcha.
they'd spend
To the point
$25.
of highlighting to us and to the village the path, like here's where you're at, kind of like fundraising thing that you always see every year, they were getting higher.
The temperature gauge,
If-
but
yeah,
instead
if
it's
I-
like water source
Right.
and
If
shade.
on the list was existing certified people, by adding this water source can get to this, and that's one of the blocks. Oh, that's easy. Oh, that's easy. So we know, we need 50 homes, or we need this many homes on top of everything we've already seen. That'll help us understand how to get to the goal, rather than just saying, yeah, we want the goal. We know what the path is.
Certainly a booth at the farmer's market will help draw attention to the issue and help other people who you don't even know have native gardens here in Lake Bluff.
and that's
They'll
how we got
hopefully
from-
come forward. Yeah.
And that's how we got from 35 people to 160, by sitting at the farmer's market and just interacting. We also do, during the wintertime, we do book discussions and other meetings. We have some speakers, and people wander in and they sign up with us too. We had a speaker from the Botanic Garden last year, Matt Evans, wonderful guy, and he's going to be speaking for the Park District. We're doing a talk on the ravine on April 26th at the Union Church, and we hope to talk about, Kathy O'Hare will be there talking about the history, and then Cliff Miller, who's been around the village forever, will be talking, and then Matt will finish up with sort of energy and how do we get going and take tours in the ravine and stuff. So everything we do is wildlife oriented, and we will go. One of the things about what you said with open lands in the Conserve Lake County, we have access to the information when people register in Lake Bluff, because we gave them our zip code. We are getting that information. It's confidential. I mean, we don't give it out because from a confidentiality standpoint, but I don't think open lands would give us access to see who is certified with them. If we see the sign in the yard, we can see it, but that's one of the challenges. But
So that was my question, is so that if someone fills out this, sends it in, you guys will get a notice of that.
yeah, they have a running spreadsheet, and I can
Okay,
click on
great.
it whenever I want, so, yeah.
Great. Couple other things that we've talked about before is the renovation of the train station area, the landscaping there, and I think there was plans for native planting in that area. So that should possibly could be, if it's not on your list already of things.
The only thing I don't know with the village, I mean, this website is huge, and getting through it is extremely, I won't say cumbersome, but there's a lot of pieces. The water aspect, that's the big one.
Yeah, okay.
We just don't know. I know, we also have, there's a train prairie just north of the train. That too
right.
could qualify, but again, the water source, so.
Yeah, but again, if you've got a table and say, okay, outside the train station, this would qualify with a water source of this kind, that's all we need to know. That's
Yeah.
all the village needs to know.
There's gonna be, well, I thought there might be a fountain or something. there.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if they define
Yeah,
what that
what's the
additive
missing
is.
thing?
Yeah, we could say, here's what we think would qualify today.
Exactly.
And here's what we think could qualify if there was
Exactly.
added something else. And that's we're going to go through and add the points. We just haven't had that organizational meeting yet, because as we look through it, it's like, oh, list of plants for our community. Yep, got that. I've been working on that for 3 years. So we have a lot of the stuff already in place.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be difficult,
Yeah.
but we will definitely be able to
Yeah.
itemize it a little better. We just first wanted to make sure that you are all in support of it.
Yes, I think we are, and I think with your analysis and support, we would be. Yeah.
You know, I just
meeting-
want to add one more thing.
Sure.
And I don't think people know this, but this just came to light for you a month ago, right? I mean, this group jumped. They saw the article, they jumped, and look how far you've already come. Getting to the point where you've got a group together and you've got the points and you know what you're going to do. I mean, it's just amazing. This hasn't been on the back burner for months and months. This just happened and you made it happen. And I think that
Doing it.
we've got the dark sky ordinance. We've got the, limit the
blower.
gas leaf blower ordinance. So this, all about habitat.
We got Bird City
Well,
USA.
And we got Bird City USA, so it feels like a perfect blend. And the other thing, just for everybody, there are 4 things that Wildlife Federation is looking for. They're looking for water and cover for animals to hide and rest. And what are the other 2?
Habitat, and an oak tree is habitat. They'll let, for a bird nest. And food, and the food, ideally the food is native plants, but we all know native plants take a while. So supplementing with bird feeders is absolutely fine. So we don't want to encourage feeding squirrels and raccoons, but we're focusing on the birds. And the number one food for birds is caterpillars, the number one for our songbirds. So you got to save those bugs, and that's what the native plants will help with, so.
And places to raise young
Yes,
is how they
yes.
call it. Places for cover, places to raise young.
And that would be the tree,
Well,
the
and,
nest.
and the village put together a lot of information for the Bird City application, so I don't know if that's worth sharing. It might already have pulled together information that you
There
could
might be more
use.
points there too, with whatever
Some
we
of it,
did.
yeah. And the Bird City people are on my group, so we
Okay.
share.
Perfect.
We're
Perfect.
getting anybody we hear about, so, well, thank you very much.
One last thing, I
Sure.
just want to, an opportunity is this deep tunnel project is going to disrupt Lillian Dell's Ravine. That's city-owned land. There's a great opportunity there, and I know that Drew and the city engineer are working with a landscaping company with some preliminary plans to rehabitat that, because it's going to be really torn up.
Yeah.
And it's an ideal, obviously, it's a ravine, it's a wonderful habitat, but it's going to need some care and nurturing to get it back to having those sustainable elements to it. And so I think there's an opportunity there, if you desired to have your group engage with the planning of that, to make sure they're using best practices and providing all those elements that would tick off the list for that area.
Do you have any idea, year-wise, when that would be? 2 years, 5 years?
I think it could be started this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I have worked with Drew with the bridge on Glen and other places, but, and that was the other thing, it was one of the things that we have an option to do as a project. So if there's some kind of project that we can do collaboratively, like you want to get the message out and it meets our criteria, dark skies is so important. Our insects die from those lights. Unfortunately, downlighting helps a little, but that's not as much, but the yellow lights, I have yellow lights in my house, so like literally yellow, I'm outside. Those kind of things we are absolutely in line with, so.
It's sell them at the farmer's market.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we could talk about it at the farmer's market.
Exactly.
Of course, that is another wildlife-friendly
When we're selling our
municipal
plants.
ordinance.
Light bulbs.
So light bulbs.
Yeah, light bulbs and plants. There you go. It's a
We even have a.
rock solid
We've
business
already
plan.
created, in fact, I'm gonna give it to National Wildlife Federation to see if they want to use it as a template. We have a one-page document on what you can do instead of mosquito spray, because that stuff is so horrible.
Oh, that's
And,
excellent.
yeah, so we have been working.
Great, it's awesome.
Okay.
Okay, good.
So,
More points.
motion to make a recommendation to the board to have a proclamation that they are in support of NWF certification? Is that the right wording of the?
Yes, with the appropriate information provided on how to get there.
With the appropriate
With the
information.
roadmap.
Yeah,
Once
with
the
the road.
roadmap, then we can make that motion, I think.
Yeah.
Do I need to
Just-
repeat
well,
that?
Proclamation
just a-
after you get it. No?
I think it's probably before to count towards the
Before.
points, but just a question that I have for you guys. Would you like them to come back once they have that kind of checklist?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
so maybe that's something we can aim for our next meeting in April, if that works for you guys?
to come back and,
With the roadmap, the
with the
draft.
roadmap.
Draft.
I'm thinking we might be able to get you before the next meeting.
Okay,
Oh,
but we
good.
could study it, but yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Okay,
thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
thank you.
Slut.
okay. Village staff report?
Yeah, so tomorrow we have our first meeting for the public hearing for the comprehensive land use plan update. And so with that, that's just again, opening that up to the public for discussion and for a presentation and just kind of keep trying to get that perfected before it's officially adopted. There is a big section in there on environmental topics, so definitely within your wheelhouse if you have any interest and want to attend that virtually or in person and provide
That's
feedback.
tomorrow night?
Yep, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. in here.
Okay,
So that's the first one. The second one, just I know we've talked a little bit about Bird City today, and I just wanted to let you know that I gave a presentation today to the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus about our experience with Bird City and kind of where we got points and where just some tips and tricks that we learned. And it was kind of an effort to encourage other communities to look at that as well. So that was something that was really well received. People were very impressed that our small community had attempted that and had received it with such a large number of criteria points. So it was received really well. I just wanted to let you guys know that.
Great.
It's great.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if more would do it. It'd be great.
Yeah, they have added a few more within the last few months, but I think they're still under 15 communities in the state.
under the village business we were talking earlier, we had modified the leaf blower ordinance. What's the process now?
So that went to discussion at the village board level. It was just kind of a preliminary discussion of this is what was recommended. We asked if they had any kind of remaining questions. They didn't have a ton, but they wanted to have more time to discuss this. So what we'll do is we're putting together just some more information. We're pulling applications for contractor licenses from other communities so that the board can take a look at what that might look like if we decide to do that. And then one other update on that is the managers for the towns that were in that working group did meet. They met, I want to say yesterday or the day before, sorry, yesterday, it's Tuesday, on Monday, and they just kind of discussed where they were with their evaluations, and it sounds like everyone is still kind of in flux as well. Most of the communities have the 9-month ban
That's good to.
Yeah, and so they're looking at next steps of possibly bringing in more people for another meeting, more members from the working group. So the representatives for the landscaping community, and also some of the groups, the AGZA group that was also part of that initial report. So there's no date for that, but that was kind of what the next steps were outlined for that meeting.
Okay, so in terms of making the 9-month changes, do we think it'll happen in spring, or it'll probably be more in the fall?
That's a good question. So how our ban currently is, as you know, is May 15th to September 30th. I think the likelihood of getting something changed before like April, when that would
Right.
kind of happen, is probably
Right, that's what I'm thinking now.
Minimal,
It's probably
yeah.
gonna be the fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be my guess, or something before, and then we'd spend months kind of getting the word out so that we're
Sure.
ready for then.
Okay.
And really, with what we're looking at, 15 days would be kind of the difference, because
Right.
it would be, the month of April versus April through May 15th. Also, one of the industry groups I know said it would be helpful if we kept that April to May 15th sort of time frame, just because every season is a little different as far as when leaves fall. So there's definitely a lot of things to consider. When we were on that call, one community said that the administrator had a little bit of leeway as far as granting extensions and things like that too, for if there was a later leaf fall in certain periods. So there's just, I guess there's a lot to explore with this.
You know what, though? I mean, right off the bat, I think we should just say, these are the months, and not, because my idea of leaf fall and somebody else's idea of leaf fall may be very, very different. And one day the wind blows and they're all gone. So I think keep it simple. I know we're not at that point now, but I just want to say, keep it simple and just have it by the calendar and not by the temperature or the season. Just have it by calendar date.
I
And
agree.
then
It's
everybody
easier
will
to
be able
remember, it's
plan.
easier for everybody to understand, it's easier to communicate.
Yes.
Instead of being like, unless we do this, that, or the other nice thing about Lake Bluff is we are consistently colder temperatures than everybody else.
Yes.
Because we're so close to the lake, which means our leaves are typically the first ones to fall.
Okay, well, if there's a village board meeting, let us know where this comes up for discussion, and we'll hope for the fall.
I mean, I would like to get it done as soon as possible.
Well, I know, I agree.
You know,
I
like,
agree, but
I don't know why we just keep kicking the can down the road. And
Well, where, is there a meeting, the next meeting, where we can go if we have an opportunity to hear the discussion? And as residents, not just, I'm a member of the SEC, but as a
Yeah.
resident, to be able to say, why do we keep,
kicking
what's
the
holding
can
us
down the-
back?
yeah.
What do we need to do to enact this right away?
So I guess there's the two different types of meetings. There's the groups that are the working group meeting that has taken place, and that it sounds like there will be future meetings of where all of the communities that initially participated in that 2022 working group are looking at kind of next steps and discussing those. And then there's the village board meetings where
Right.
those are very much you would be able to attend and hear what's
Yes,
going
that's what I'm
on.
thinking.
And though I'm guessing that we'll likely have some sort of update in April, just based on this meeting we had. It might just be an informational update, but I think it really depends how quickly that working group is able to get together.
So that's
again.
that's kind of a hurdle that we have to jump before the board can make a decision?
So not necessarily, but in kind of Lake Bluff, helping to get that going again, I think that's something where we would want to see what the consensus of that is before making our final decision.
Okay, so.
Or we could be leaders and encourage the rest
Yes,
of the
I was
working
just
group
gonna say.
to
Make a
follow our
recommendation.
lead.
Yes, and
I mean,
say,
this is our turf, right? Like,
yes, that's right, so,
well, to a certain extent, I mean, remember, we're an ad hoc committee.
Yes.
Yes.
We serve at the discretion, we're not like the zoning board.
Yes.
Our recommendations go to the village, and the village makes the decision. However, there's nothing to stop anyone from this committee as a resident to go to the next village board meeting and say, this is what I prefer.
Yes.
This is what we want. But understanding that they're coming at this from, we're gonna do this, but we wanna see what the other town, it's not like they're not gonna do it. They're looking if there's any tweaks, any little fine tunes that would align them better with what 8 other towns are gonna do in the next 6 months,
Gonna do, maybe.
maybe.
But that
But
gives
that
them,
doesn't bind them, it doesn't bind them.
No.
But having that discussion is like, okay,
But like Member Twitchell said, it's an opportunity for Lake Bluff to be a leader, especially in this space where we know a lot of people are going to be moving
Right.
to, and they're looking for other examples in order to say, see what they're doing, we should be doing that too.
I think a 9-month is a nice compromise. It's certainly not the year ban we had, so I agree.
no, I think 9 months. So for 2025, are we saying then that our gas leaf blower ban will start on May 15th? Are we anticipating it's going
No.
to start any sooner than that?
No, they're saying it's probably gonna be September.
No, I mean the one that's existing right
Existing.
now.
Right.
So our
yeah.
existing ban is from May 15th
Right,
to
correct.
September 30th.
Which
we
is
won't see
what
any-
will happen for 2025, if I'm understanding.
That's my question.
Well,
Yes, that's what it sounds like.
yes, the only difference is if we enact the 9-month ban, then the
Next month.
ban would start up again in
What's the back-
November.
What's the back end, yeah.
Or-
November.
Oh, the back end
December,
is, so
sorry.
after November, then we kick in
If we-
December
yeah.
through April.
Yeah, because the ban would pretty much be the same from May 15th through September
Okay.
30th. Does
Yes.
that make sense? So that's kind
Yes.
of also why it feels like maybe there's a little bit less of an urgency because we have that upcoming. And I mean, the ban that we're looking at would allow leaf blowers from April 1st through April 30th. So, I mean, it's already March 18th.
Yes,
So does that make sense?
yeah, so,
What's the
May-
back, what's the back
September's-
end then, if we did 9
There you
months?
go,
What's the
that's-
9 months?
So it's,
April,
in the other communities, it would be allowed for April, October, and November would be the 3 months that it would be allowed.
so
so
if we were
maybe
to.
the end of November, is this where you're going with that?
No, I'm just trying to think, if we were to enact something this year still, it's really not gonna have an impact on 2025's ban, whether it's 9 months or the current one.
That's
well,
the
you
discussion
know.
that we're having right now.
Exactly. Your leaf blowers going November, December.
Yeah.
You know, so if we could kick it in,
Okay, I see what you're saying.
yeah, if the ban that we have now
Make it
goes to the
clean.
end of September,
Yeah.
then, and it's allowed October and November, then we actually kick in with the 9 months at
Yeah.
the end of November. So then we roll it into,
It would
can't
probably
blow
start
again
in-
with gas leaf blowers till April.
And how long did we say we thought the 9-month would be good for? Just indefinitely until we can get to a year round?
That's a good question.
Are you saying,
Can't
when can we go
remember.
from 9 to 12?
Yes.
Our first recommendation was 12,
I know.
and they came back and said, well, how about 6? And then we said, okay,
I think
we did
that's,
6. And then we were like, all right, now let's do a year.
Yeah.
And like, how about 9? And they're like,
Well,
okay.
I think,
Yeah,
I think
little by
part
little
of,
though.
I think part of that was they're getting the band back together, okay, the entire
Yes.
group. And I don't think there's an objection to 9 months. I think as far as going from 9 months to a year, I think they're looking for what is happening, and we talked about this, across all the communities to make it easier for the landscapers. This is in opposition to the thing is, no, we're gonna be the leader and our little town is going to lead all these other 8 towns along, but they may not. So I think it's fair to say this is what Lake Bluff's going to do with the 9-month now. We're going to 9-month. You guys should do this. We should talk to them. I mean, we're all community members. I mean, Lake County, the North Shore. You should go to 9-month, and then maybe there's a consensus among these towns like, hey, everyone, how about a year or 2 to go to a year?
Yes.
I mean, I almost think our recommendation should be our original recommendation, which
It
is
is.
a year. Like, we are recommending a year. And you guys came back and said, no, 6 months, and said, okay, we're still recommending a year. We still want the year ban.
I
I
know
don't think
that.
anyone here
You mean
wants the
year-round.
9-month ban.
Yeah.
We're just going along because that's what the board is coming to us, say, hey, what do you think about a 9-month? And I think we could be
a
strong
step.
leaders and saying, no, a year.
Right.
Like, we've been saying it for 2 years now.
You know what, though? I think we're gonna get the yes with 9 months. I think that is the
I'm
way
sure
to
we
get
will,
the yes.
but-
And then in a year or two, we'll get a year.
And
That's
then
my
we'll get-
feeling.
so
Why
it'll
don't we, why
just
don't
get-
we ask to
Yeah, I
put in a
guess-
timestamp, though, to say,
Yeah, it's
okay,
been a
we'll
year or
take,
two
we'll
since-
take it 9 months, but then let's ask, what is the time frame to get to a year?
Well,
Let's
that's,
put
I
a
mean,
stake in the ground now.
we have 2
Or
years.
when will we review it? Because part of it was
Or-
around
We do 2
technology,
and 2.
right? Trying to
Right.
have affordable
We
technology.
did 2 at current, we do 2 at 9, and we do 2, then we go to.
I mean,
But from our original recommendation, we were like, okay, we're gonna be light, go a light touch for the first 2 years, and then we're gonna be heavy with it. And now we're saying 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. Now we're saying
Light,
we've gone
medium,
from-
heavy.
Well, we've gone from crawl, walk, run, right? But we've gone from a 2-year sort of all blowers to no blowers recommendation to now we're saying 6 years,
Right.
which is a long time.
What if we ask for?
That's 6 years of people coming to
Yeah.
the meeting
No, I
asking
know.
for a year.
Asking
So
for
instead of
everything.
saying 2 years, why don't we just ask or, suggest that we know, what are those elements that are keeping you from going to a year? Right now,
Why
it's
don't you, why don't you
committees.
come,
I'll come. And
talk to the 8 communities, and you tell them that. You say, what's holding you up,
what's holding you guys up?
okay?
And if it's
And I-
technology, what does the technology have to
Right,
get?
I mean, the whole point of this is we're not part of, I mean, all of our codes are not the same. But the point of getting all these people together was to move this forward in a way that was good for the communities, it was good for the landscapers, and we all work together. Because we don't want it working against Lake Bluff. We don't want to go a year and then find out we're having troubles implementing that. So we go to the 9 months, then we go to this meeting with all the group and we say, okay, we're going to 9, you guys should go to 9 too. What does it take for all of us to go to a year?
Right.
That's the key,
Yeah,
all of
that's it.
us.
Right. And I think that the board, that helps the board, that helps the other communities. And the other communities may be going, well, Lake Bluff just went to 9, why aren't we going to 9? And then they want to go to a year in 2 years from that or a year from now. I think that's part of this discussion. I think we're making the progress. It's slow, I understand, but that was what we had to come up with. And at the same time,
Well, that was what we were at. They said.
we're at the discretion of the board,
Right.
and we should be pushing them, but we should also be cooperative. when
But
we
I
can.
still think there is value in us offering our original recommendation of a
They
year.
know what it is. It's on the record. We recommended a year. That
Yeah.
went to them, and they knocked it down.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Now,
I
the
think
other
so
thing-
They're
even.
asking for our endorsement of the
yeah.
9 month, then
Yes.
I think we should say, we prefer a year. We'll take
They,
9.
they know that.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was the resolution of
They
our
do-
last
they do.
meeting, and we
Yeah.
said, okay.
But the other thing we could do in tandem, because it's all about leaf blowers right now, is it gas or electric? But the bigger picture is leave the leaves. Because if you leave the leaves, you're not gonna need a leaf blower at all. So if we can run those 2 things parallel.
Well, there are safety issues with leaves.
But there's
Well,
your
I mean,
patio
of
and the
course,
sidewalk.
It's not a
and,
blanket
you know.
leave the leaves. I mean, a lot of communities
Yeah, I
have
think
started that.
I think and again, this is not really our agenda item tonight, I just
No.
brought it up. I think that, we have the no mow, right?
Yes?
No leaf. And then that's the way we go.
Leave
for-
them
yeah.
alone.
Leave them alone, there you go.
That's a great one.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
anyway, Brian, just
It's
to,
building
just to
office
tie that up, I
Yeah.
just want to
Still
make
trying to
sure when
think,
we
though.
ask
We
the
got by
board
for
for the 9 month, they know
leaf
the goal
blowers of any
is 12
kind.
No,
months.
they've been
Like,
around.
Right.
that
But I
it's-
mean,
yeah.
like,
No,
when
no,
some
that's-
people
I mean,
grow
that
up-
right.
Did you grow up with a
No.
leaf blower?
Yeah.
No,
I had rakes.
I
didn't know
did
where it
in the
was.
We had
80s.
rakes.
I
They
didn't
were-
never even heard of it until we moved here.
We had
I didn't know
rakes.
what it was.
We had rakes, and my dad kicked us out to go rake the leaves.
We used to burn them.
You also didn't have the internet, and that's
True. Okay.
We're streaming cartoons 24/7.
Yes.
Okay, anyone else, anything wants to bring up?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. You go.
I just wanted to recognize and thank Lauren.
I was going to do the
understand-
same thing. Thank you. For
There's a
your
little
service.
party. Did everybody get
support.
that email?
Yes.
There's a little party for you.
Thank you for your service. Good luck in the future.
Yes.
We're gonna miss you.
We are gonna miss
Come see us
you.
at the farmers market. You know the drill. Yeah, it's awesome.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Now, we can fill these out right away, can't we?
Recording stopped.
Yeah.